was set up on the other one, but not this one.
Okay.
Okay, so we are live and I'm going to start recording, and it's actually 6:33.
I call this budget hearing workshop to order for May 5th, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Richard Voss,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Nadia Sykes,
Here.
Commissioner Sharon McDonald,
Here.
Commissioner Josh Reardon,
Here.
Commissioner Susan Payne,
Here.
Commissioner Dusty Wright,
Here.
Commissioner Jason Baldwin, and I see he's trying to come into the meeting right now. We'll come back around him. City Manager Brian Caesar,
Here.
City Attorney Patria Bengoshe, and the clerk is present, and we just need Commissioner Baldwin is coming in right now.
Unmute. There you go.
Commissioner Baldwin?
I'm here.
Present?
Can you hear me? Present?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll move on to approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Who was that?
Nadia Sykes.
I have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Sykes to approve the agenda. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Payne. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. We'll move on to presentations. Item 1, Finance will present the preliminary fiscal year 2021 City of Alamogordo budget. And we have Evelyn Huff, our Finance Director, here to give us some discussion on that. Quite a lot of discussion, probably.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that I can present the PowerPoint for you all for the budget. So give us a second. Okay, y'all should see the PowerPoint. So I am Evelyn Huff. I am the Finance Director for the City of Alamogordo. With me is Brian Caesar, City Manager. Also available is Stephanie Hernandez, Assistant City Manager, and Katie Jocelyn, Human Resource Manager, will also be presenting part of the budget as well. So our agenda for this evening, we're going to have the City Manager introduction. We're going to talk about the budget timeline, the budget overview for all the funds, the budget overview per fund type, and the gross receipts tax overview, the personnel budget, and the reserve policy. Because I have my screen shared, doesn't mean that I get to see all of you in video. I only get to see a couple. So I'll pause after kind of each section so that if there's any questions, we can get to those. And that way I don't missing anybody. So we'll go ahead and start with our City Manager introduction, and we have City Manager Brian Caesar.
All right, I'll make this very brief. First, I'd like to thank not only finance, but all the directors, managers, the other staff that was involved in preparing this budget. This is one of the more challenging ones we've had in recent years. Normally, we will take we'll do the budget once, maybe twice at most. This go around, we had to revise the budget for the first round an additional 3 times. I think well, it is a balanced budget. The assumptions that we're making due to the closures because of COVID-19, businesses have been closed for an extended period of time, and we do not know quite when they will reopen. We think we put together a solid budget. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Evelyn and we'll just jump right into it.
Okay, so our first portion is the budget adoption timeline. We obviously right now are at the budget public hearings commission. Today is May 5th. We have it scheduled for May 6th and May 7th if needed. We would adopt the preliminary budget at the regular city commission meeting, not on May 12th, but on May 26th. Yeah.
Evelyn, let me interject. Can everybody put their microphone on mute? There's some pretty bad feedback, and Patria's listening in offsite, and she says that some feedback. So if you're ready, when you want to talk, just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay. So the preliminary budget is due to DFA no later than June 1st, 2020, and that is a virtual upload. So we have until on May 31st to upload it. Upon the year-end close for FY20, we will revise the FY21 preliminary budget as necessary to update any actual beginning fund balances, carry over any capital. We can also make any other changes at that point in time. So if we feel that situations are changing more than what we have in the current budget, we can adjust it at this time. The FY21 final budget does need to be approved at a regular commission meeting. So that is scheduled for July 28th, 2020. And it is due to DFA no later than July 31st. And so that is one of those situations, those dates are hard dates. DFA has not been able to change anything with those. The only guidance that DFA has been able to offer is that the preliminary budget does not have to be approved by resolution. So could upload a budget on June 1st without having taken it to a regular commission meeting. That's not something that we ever like to do. So we still plan to take it on the May 26th meeting agenda. Questions on the timeline? Okay, moving on for the budget overview. This is all funds combined. So what we have here is our FY20 projections. We ask all of the departments starting in October through January to go back and look at their current FY20 budget and see if they are going to have a shortfall, if they are, doing better than expected and not going to expend all their funds. So we project their current year budget, which is what you see there in the first column. And then we ask them to project their budget for FY21. So for the fiscal year that is starting on July 1st, 2020. So as you can see, began FY20 with $59.4 million in cash. Our revenues are projected at $70.5 million. Transfers in and out must match. So we're transferring about $22 million in between funds. Expenditures right now are projected at $93.1 million. Everything all together. This is general fund, debt service, capital, everything added together. So those are large numbers, but they encompass the entire operations of the city. So that makes our net revenue number a negative $22.5 million, which brings our ending fund balance to a projected $36.9 million. As you can see, we have a revenue or a reserve of $6 million due to our current reserve policy and the DFA requirements. So that takes our adjusted ending cash balance projected for the end of FY20 to $30.9 million. Moving on to FY21, as you can see, our beginning fund balance, our projected beginning fund balance is a little different than our ending fund balance from FY20. That's due to the internal service fund. We always project that the internal service fund is going to start the year at 0, even if on the budget for from the previous year. They're projected to make a little bit of money because we always do a reconciliation right at the end of the year to make sure that we're not overcharging funds for their internal services. So that's why there's that small, about $13,000 difference there. We also are ascribing to the policy of not projecting cash. So we're not going to try and guess what our savings or any other sort of cash savings are. We take that number directly from the end balance of FY20 and move it to the starting balance of FY21. So as you can see, our revenues are projected to decrease to, oh, I need to get closer to the microphone, I'm being told, or talk louder. Okay. I thought I was talking so loud anyway. Our revenues, we're showing a decrease of $22 million. There's a couple different reasons for that. Revenues, remember, do include grant revenues that we do as part of a carryover. So there's an especially large number in that revenue for Bonita Lake. And so that revenue will carry over depending on what is going on with that project at the end of FY20. So that is one of the biggest differences there. Obviously, though, due to the current circumstances with COVID-19, we have projected our revenues down. We projected our revenues down for FY20, and we projected some revenue decrease for FY21. So that is part of the differences that you're seeing in our revenue numbers. And then our transfers in and out, again, are the transfers in between funds. And as you can see, our expenditures, we're showing a decrease of $41.5 million. Again, a big portion of that is capital that is currently budgeted in FY20 and will carry over the balances for FY21, including Bonita Lake, including the core project. So we have some really big projects that are sitting out there that will carry over. All that said, our net revenue would be a minus 3.1 million, leaving us with an ending fund balance of 33.7 million. We're asking to make some changes to our reserve policy, which we will talk about later in the presentation. But as you can see, that would actually decrease what we would hold in reserves, and it would give us an estimating ending fund balance of $28.8 million. Are there any questions on this? And we'll get into all of this more in detail by fund type and also by revenue and expenditure later in the presentation. Okay, our revenue assumptions for our gross receipts tax, we use a 3-year average with a 25% decrease starting in May of FY20 due to COVID-19. That 25% decrease goes from May to December is what we projected. Then we also projected a 12.5% decrease from January through March. So we've projected a decrease for a substantial amount of time. We think that that helped us in being very realistic with our revenues and being able to balance our budget. This year, the hold harmless deduction is currently at 30%. It will increase to 37% in FY21. Our gross receipts tax number does include the 1/8 restricted tax estimated to begin on July 1st based on the vote from March. The other thing that I did not include on this slide in terms of tax projections is we did project the lodger's tax to decrease substantially due to the COVID-19. So we have the lodger's tax decreasing by 50% through December. And then to 25% through January and March, and then 12.5% through the end of fiscal year 21. We really think that the lodger's tax is going to take a big hit, and so we wanted to reflect that in those funds. Our property tax is calculated using the DFA formula and the DFA form that has to be turned in with our budget and assuming a 95% collection rate. Franchise fees, we did not project any growth. Services were projected by their departments initially, and then they were decreased due to the COVID-19 closures. Working with departments, A note on this is that as the summer goes on and we see what's in store for the rec center and the civic center, the senior center, we are going to probably have to go back and reevaluate our charge for services again to make sure that we're staying in line, with the closures that these departments have seen. Our investment income is based on our current earning rates. We didn't do a lot of reprojection with this, partially because it's hard right now due to the current climate. So that's something, again, we're going to have to look at. And as usual, our grants will carry over based on the agreements and based on the availability that we hear from those funding sources. Is there any questions on our revenue assumptions? Okay, so here's a little bit more breakdown of our revenues. As you can see, what we projected again for the FY21s, we actually increased our tax projection for FY20 because up until the COVID-19 situation and all the way through what we received in April, we were above our projections. So that was really, we were feeling really good there for a while. Because we were above our projections and we were seeing really good returns. We did actually increase that a little bit from our original budget. But as you can see, going into FY21, we have decreased that $3 million to take into account the changes that we expect to see. All of our other revenue, we have decrease. Obviously, our state share taxes is another one that we believe is going to be hit due to the virus. So we've seen a decrease there. Part of the user fees increasing has to do with how deeply we cut them for the end of FY20. So again, these are ones that might have to be reviewed as closures go on, but we did deeply cut them for May and June of, well, April, May, June of FY20. On the miscellaneous revenue, there's a big change there. There's a couple things I want to touch there. One, we are no longer charging a franchise fee to Fund 81 in the water department. And that was money that went from Fund 81 into Fund 11. Per the city manager's direction, we removed that this year. Also, what it was hitting this miscellaneous revenue is the one-time revenue rebate that we received from the landfill. And so that's a one-time thing, and that's not something that we budget because it's completely dependent on their performance. The other thing is an error on my part. We did have some bond and loan proceeds. Instead of getting that in the next row down on bond and loan proceeds, it got rolled up with the miscellaneous revenue. So that's one of the reasons why that number looks like it's dropping $3.9 million, because there's a one-time loan proceeds and then those one-time payment from the landfill and the franchise fee. Obviously, as I say over and over again, the grants are subject to carryover depending on the various agreements. Are there any questions on this revenue table? Okay. This is the major revenues for all funds. It's just kind of a bar graph to show you where we are going. As you can see, FY20, we were going in a really good direction for a while. We have not seen the May GRT number yet. As you guys all know, the May number will reflect the GRT collected by businesses in March. So, you know, obviously we're interested to see that. We're very interested to see the June number because that will be what was collected in April. And that could be, you know, really substantially down. So based on that, as you can see, we projected FY20 down. That's where you're going to see that 25% cut and the 12% cut that we've projected. And then property taxes stay pretty flat. They're pretty constant. And then as you can see, our user fees, we had our FY19 actual is higher than what we're projecting for 20 and 21. But again, those are cuts due to closures and that, you know, we really want to liability on that. Okay, expenditures. So the city manager's direction to all the departments at the beginning of the budget process in November was for the current FY20 budget to keep it a flat budget, no increases in expenditure lines without a corresponding decrease in an expenditure line. The same thing for FY21, again, a flat budget with no increases without a corresponding decrease. After we did these, after we did the city manager director meetings at the end of February, there were multiple departments that we had to go back to in March and make additional cuts or transfers based on the decreases that happened due to COVID-19, especially in the places that had to close, or like municipal court that wasn't allowed to have court anymore. We definitely had to make some adjustments there. Initially, we thought that we were going to be able to go through a regular personnel and capital process and look at the different options that we were going to have for those. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So this budget that we're presenting tonight does not have any new positions and does not have any new capital. So you'll see when we go into it that most of the departments do not have anything in the capital line. The only one that's kind of different than that is MIS, and that has to do with existing agreements that we have for computer replacement and for our phone replacement. Okay, so looking at the expenditures, which is always our big one, is salaries and benefits. We are showing an increase from our FY20 projected to our FY21 of 2.8 million. There's three large things that go into this increase. One, in FY20, we very aggressively reprojected our salaries and benefits. What we do is we allow the departments to go and reproject their salaries and benefits for their current year. Some are very proactive and they really look at them and they really try and hone it down. Some departments didn't look at it at all. This year in FY20, we had a wage increase on January 1st. That was going to make it harder for departments to look at their salaries and benefits. What we chose to do, instead of having the departments do it, finance actually did it. So that meant that every department got looked at, every position got looked at, and a lot of the vacancy savings were adjusted out. A lot of the departments that maybe never adjusted their salaries and benefits for the first time did have an adjustment. So this number was aggressively adjusted down to a more realistic place. There is still going to be some vacancy savings that are in that $20 million number. This number does not include the recent layoff of the part-time and seasonal. It doesn't have that savings in it. It also doesn't have any of the positions that haven't been filled since March. So there's still going to be some savings in the salaries and benefits, but it's certainly closer to an actual number than it has been in the past. In FY21, the FY21 number includes a 50-cent raise for employees on July 1st. It includes a 50-cent raise for employees on January 1st. It includes on January 1st making sure that we are in compliance with the minimum wage law. And then it also includes a 3% increase in health insurance premiums and an increase in our workers' comp mod rate, which we'll talk more about when we get to her slides a little bit later in the presentation. So there's two factors in that $2.8 million increase. It's an increase on the FY21, but it's also a decrease in the FY20. As you can see, all of our other expenditure lines are showing decreases, either from one-time expenditures or from the strategy that we've had of, being aggressive with our cuts and trying to make a bunch of small cuts and considerations before to make a really large one if the situation is not a positive one. And again, my same phrase that I always say, capital outlay will carry over into FY21 if projects are not completed. The money that's showing there in the 8.6 million, a lot of that is the designated funds. So streets, where we have Fund 109 where we have to spend it on streets in the capital outlay. So that's why there is a number there for FY21. Any questions on this chart? This is a pie chart, just kind of showing you what we kind of all already know. Salaries and benefits are by far our biggest expense. And then everything else is kind of broken up there from there. The other services portion is always when we get questioned about. That has a lot of different items that roll up into it. Everything from training and travel to our Alamogordo beautification line, to in-house engineering fees, to wells and monitoring and testing. So there's a lot of different things that make up that other services category.
Evelyn, I have a quick question if you don't mind.
Yes.
What was last year's salaries and benefits? For some reason, 39% comes to mind.
I would have to look. I do not have that off the top of my head. That'll have to be a number we look up for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, expenditures by category. As you can see, this is capital outlay, just kind of shoots everybody off the top because it is such a large number and we have those really large projects right now. Otherwise, the biggest thing that we spend is our salaries and benefits. That's a big number for us. Okay. And then as you can see, everything else is either pretty much staying flat or in a decrease. Again, that other services number has a lot of different things rolled into it, things that end up being one-time costs as well. So that's why we're seeing a decrease in that. And then obviously our debt service is completely driven by our bond schedules and our loan schedules. Okay. Any questions on the overview of all the funds combined? And to let you know, Commissioner Baldwin, Brian went to go find that number, so we should have it. Okay, budget overview by fund type. The first fund type that we're going to go into is the general fund. As we know, the general fund gets a lot of our attention because it's where the majority of our revenues end up, and it is where we subsidize a substantial portion of some of our other funds out of. But there are several of our important departments that live in the general fund. And so there's a list of them here, including city manager's office, finance, animal control, the police department, and the fire department. Large departments that live in the general fund, along with it subsidizing many other departments. All right, so this is our recap for the general fund. At the top is our current year, our FY 2020 reprojected. As you can see, we began the year with $6.8 million in cash. Estimated revenues are $18.9 million. Our estimated expenditures are $13 million. Normally that'd be great. We would be making money. But as you can see, it's the transfers out that really add to that, because our net transfers is $6.7 million out of the general fund into funds. So our estimated ending cash balance is $6.025 million with our reserves on there. As you can see, then that gets us to $3.3 million after reserves. Moving into FY21, thank you. Moving into FY21, Our beginning cash balance would be 6.025. As you can see, we're expecting to get substantially less revenue at 16.2 million. Our net transfers are pretty similar at 6.3. Our expenditures are slightly higher at 13.7, and that would be our estimated ending cash 2.2 million. And with the possibly revised reserves, that would give us an adjusted ending cash balance of 611,000. Really quick to go back, Commissioner Baldwin, last year our salaries and benefits was 40%. Okay. Is there any questions on the recap? General fund revenues by category. Obviously, the two biggest things that drive the general fund is the GRT taxes and the state shared fees. Those are just our two big large ones. After that, we have some fees and permits, some miscellaneous revenue. So you can see we're expecting FY20 to be less profitable than FY21 to be less profitable than FY20. Transfers. The general fund does not receive very many transfers in, except for the rededication from 49, which we have an individual slide to talk about. So we'll get to that. Our transfers out are obviously the biggest thing that we talk about when it comes to transfers in the general fund. We've managed to try and keep that pretty flat. The one thing I do want to discuss here is the way we handle our transfers. We do not do a flat subsidy every month. So if a fund is budgeted to have a transfer from the general fund, a really good month, they don't have a negative cash balance, they're in good shape, then they will not receive a transfer from the general fund for that month. So it's not like we give them money, they get $30,000 or something like that from the general fund. It doesn't work like that. They only get a transfer out when the cash balance needs it. So that's one of the reasons that we're able to control the subsidies a little bit more, because we're not just doing them only on a budget basis. Any questions on the transfers in and out? Okay, expenditures by category. Obviously, the general fund is very much driven by salaries and benefits. As you can see, it's showing a large spike for FY21. There's a lot of different reasons for that. One, in both FY19 and FY20, there's substantial vacancies. Remember that the general fund is where the police department, their salaries and benefits budget lives. Currently, the police department has 14 vacancies. So in a situation like that, you're going to see substantial vacancy savings. But FY21, we do need to budget all those positions in the hope that we would be able to fill them. So that there's a substantial difference in between the actuals from FY19 and what we budgeted for FY20. As you can see, everything else has pretty much remained the same, with little growth, or if not growth, decrease, including the other services. Some of the decreases in the other services comes from clawing back the money for the Branding Alliance and clawing back the money from GRIP. Okay, my favorite slide. This is the general fund expense by department. So this just kind of shows you how the expense is broken up from department to department in the general fund. The police are obviously the largest part of this. They have the largest workforce. So their salaries and benefit number is always going to be pretty tall, along with fire, who also has a very large workforce. As you can see, everything else, the non-departmental is where a substantial amount of our insurance expense lies. It's also where our expense for operating buildings like City Hall and our additional storage come out of non-departmental. So that's one of the reasons why it's rather high, considering it's a department that doesn't have any salaries and benefits expense in it, but it carries a lot of expense for the city as general. General fund revenues versus expenditures. So this slide is showing our revenues stack up against our expenditures. So normally this would not be, this would be great. We would have more revenues than expenditures. However, this does not show the transfers out. See, the transfers out are what brings us more level with our revenues. Are there any questions so far on general fund revenues and expenditures?
I'd like to make a comment. I think that last graph we had was awesome. It's outstanding to really get a picture of where the money goes in our city government. I think you did a really good job there.
Thank you. Okay, rededication of funds. So I changed the slide a little bit from last year. This is the slide that talks about, per the ordinance, that the commission can choose to rededicate GRT funds from Fund 49 to Fund 11 for operating purposes. Previous years, it's just shown what was budgeted. And I really wanted to show not only what we had budgeted in previous years, but what we had actually transferred in previous years. So this slide, back to 2017 was last time that we actually transferred funds from Fund 49 to Fund 11. In FY19, 18, and in FY20, we have had budget to do the Fund 49 transfer, but we have not had to take advantage of that. And it's looking so far in FY20 that we probably won't have to take advantage of it in FY20 as well. The other thing that we did in FY20 that was a little different than 17, 18, and 19 is after we had gone back and gotten our cash balances as of July 1st and our final budget process, we actually went in and decreased the budget for the transfer in from 49 rather than leaving it at a high number. We didn't feel that there was any purpose to leave that there to kind of artificially increase the cash balance on the budget sheet. So we actually decreased it down to 250,000 rather than leaving it at a high level like it had been the last couple of fiscal years. So FY21, we do have it proposed in preliminary budget at a high level. There's a couple different reasons for that. One, we're kind of trying something new with the police officer positions, and I touched on that a little bit about how we budget them like they're going to be fully staffed, like they're going to have every one of those positions full. However, unfortunately, we know from past experience that it's been a long time since they've had every one of those positions full for an extended amount of time. So what we did this year is we actually increased our Fund 49 transfer in to kind of offset some of those positions that are budgeted in there, but yet we have a good likelihood of knowing that are not going to be filled. So by budgeting this in there, it gives those departments a little bit of leeway to budget their funds a little different, rather than tying up their entire budgets in positions that they know they're not going to be able to fill. So that's something that Brian had really wanted to try this year, and so we're trying it for the first time and trying to see how that works. In a situation that if all those positions do get filled, then we do have a plan for that. So is there any question on the rededication? Okay. Any other questions, comments on the general fund? Okay, so we're going to move to internal services. And as we're aware, the internal services, these are the departments that provide most of their services to other city departments versus providing services to the public at large. So procurement, human resources, facility maintenance, MIS, and fleet maintenance do most of their work for internal city departments. And as such, most of their revenue comes from other city departments, enterprise funds, and then of course they come with a large transfer in to pay for those services. So as you can see, the beginning of FY20, we had a beginning cash balance of $82,565, 412,000 in revenues. The majority of those come from City of Alamogordo enterprise funds. However, there is some revenue in there from the lease of the cell phone towers that facility maintenance receives. There is a large transfer in from other departments to pay for the internal services done based on our allocation table. And they do transfer a little bit out for some of the self-insured that they pay for. Budgeted expenditures, 3.2 million, leaving an estimated ending cash balance of $13,000. Again, like we talked about earlier, we're not 100% sure where that cash balance is going to fall based on a reconciliation. So we assume that they're going to start FY21 with 0 in their cash balance. Revenues have pretty much stayed the same. Transfers in stayed the same. We did see a decrease in their budgeted expenditures as part of the cost saving measures that we've implemented. We're again estimating they'd be right around $10,000 at the end of FY21. Internal services revenue by categories. Their miscellaneous revenue is it. The majority of that is the cell phone tower lease that facility maintenance has. And then the user fees are from the enterprise departments throughout the city. Transfers in, obviously the transfers in with 12 is the driver, covers their expenses. And as you can see, we've tried very hard to keep those as flat as possible. And then when we reconcile them at the end of the year, we like to see that there's a decrease like there was in FY19. Expenditure by category, very heavily also personnel driven. Salaries and benefits are their main drivers. Maintenance is a little higher here because it does house fleet maintenance and facility maintenance, both of which are a lot in the maintenance category. And then the other services, in internal services, again, there's just a lot of different individual things here because they do provide a lot of services. The big part that falls in here are the software licenses and the software fees. We've worked really hard the last couple of years in consolidating those under MIS so that each department isn't responsible for trying to keep track of their licenses up and how much their license is and how much this agreement is. That's all consolidated now under MIS in Fund 12 so that they can keep track of it and make sure that we don't have anything that lapses. Okay, and this is the internal services expense department. As you can see, MIS Computer Services is the highest here. Partially that's because they do have some capital in there for the phone system lease and for the computer replacement program. Facility maintenance is obviously really close as well. They, handle all of the different buildings for the city. They pay for a lot of that maintenance out of their own budget. Some of the other departments supplementing that. So they have a lot of different expenses. They have human resources and fleet kind of coming up. Human resources has some changes this year. They're handling a lot more of the physicals and the testing for the police recruitments versus a lot of that before was handled directly out of the police department budget. So that's been a change. Are there any questions on internal services? Okay. Internal services, revenues versus expenditures. This slide also includes their transfers. So as you can see, we're always really cognizant with the internal services of trying to make it even up true as we can, because again, this is not something that is paid for by any other source other than the departments and through transfers or either through user fees. We don't want to be making a profit in our internal services. Okay. We're going to move now into special revenue. Special revenue is a big category. There's a lot of different things that fall in special revenue. A lot of them are small funds that have small portions. However, there are a couple really large funds in there, such as 32, which is our community services, 44, our transportation, 71, our senior center. All of those are rather large funds. And then we do have some other funds that we're going to touch on a little bit more, such as 16 and 20, which are funded by our lodgers tax. Okay, so this is our recap for our FY20 budget. So as you can see, anything that is highlighted in yellow, any of those rows, those are subsidized funds. So that means that those funds are receiving a transfer in from the general fund to be able to have their budget in balance. I do want to highlight on this one in particular, Fund 19. This is the first time that we're seeing Fund 19 be highlighted as receiving a subsidy. And because of the closure of the courts, that was very unexpected. And the way that the funds kind of roll in this fund, they had already expended quite a bit. And so there wasn't really any other way to balance this fund. They cut everything that they had not spent completely out of this fund. And then we do have the transfer in. Good thing is so far they haven't actually had to realize the transfer in. And we're hoping that with the court hopefully being able to open up more, they have been doing more video court stuff, that they'll be able to start getting a little bit more revenue in here. And hopefully we won't have to realize that whole transfer. We did have to do that for budgeting purposes. So as you can see, there's a lot of really big funds in here with a large starting cash balance. And fortunately, these funds, some of them, it's never going to happen that they're going to be able to have revenues that support their expenditures. So this fund has, very large transfer in as well. Okay, this is the recap for the special revenues for fiscal year 21. Something I want to point out on this one is Fund 20. So this is the fund where the Civic Center and the special events are recorded. The Civic Center was hit extremely hard by COVID-19 because they are funded through lodgers tax and they are funded through their rental. So obviously, as we've talked about already, the lodgers tax is taking a huge hit. And when you're not allowed to have your building open, you're not allowed to charge any rental fees. They really took a heavy hit. We cut their budget substantially for FY20 to get it balanced, and then again for FY21. So this and then still without cutting any positions, they still needed a transfer in from the general fund to be able to balance. So it's definitely, they saw a substantial decrease in their special events money available in just about everything. I mean, we cut them hard. Oh, I hear that Jason has finally been able to get back on. And so the answer to your question from earlier is salaries and benefits last year were 40%. Perfect. Okay, so along the line, everything else here in the special revenue has kind of tracked right along where it's been at. So special revenues by category. Several of these funds receive most of their funding through taxes. Funds like 16 and 20 through the lodger's tax, 42, 44, 69, and 89 through gross receipts tax. So that's why the taxes are so high. Other funds rely a lot on users fees, such as 32, 20 receives user fees as well, 71, 74. So that's the user fees are important. Again, this is going to be something that's probably going to have to be revisited at the beginning of FY21 to look, because as you can see, we basically stopped the user fees in their tracks in March. We came back with the reprojections and said, okay, like you're not going to be able to open again for the rest of the fiscal year. So that's why you see that middle bar dip down and the blue bar kind of be a little bit above it, because we are hoping at some point in FY21 that they are going to be able to open up. The grants, the biggest portion of the grants here are the senior center. The senior center receives a substantial amount of money in grants, but there are grants throughout all of these various funds. Okay, special revenues, transfers in and out. The transfers in are very important to the special revenues, especially obviously, as you can see, Fund 2 is the largest one for that, as they receive a transfer of about $4 million. They're probably the leader on that. So the transfers in for FY20 did go up a little bit as we were trying to get some things balanced. FY20, we do have them going down some more. The transfers out, the biggest transfer out from here was for Fund 42, because Fund 42 funds Fund 44. We were actually able to decrease that transfer out a little bit for FY20, and then going into FY21. We've been really diligent with 44 and trying to get them stood up a little bit more on their own, so that's been good. The other transfer out is from 69. 69 has a transfer out to the flood control project, and then it also has a transfer to another project as well. So those transfer outs, some of those will carry over. The flood control one will. That project continues to go on. Is there any question on special revenues about the transfers or about the revenues? Special revenue expenditures by category. Salaries and benefits are a big portion of special revenue. There's a lot of employees that are housed here, all of community services, the senior center, streets, drainage. So there's a lot of different things that hit here. Salary and benefit numbers that we're showing you tonight on this presentation do not include part-time or seasonal employees. So that amount is still included in the FY20 number and in the FY21 number as well. But as you can see with the rest of the expenses, we're expecting a decrease for FY21. That's what we have the budget, and that's what we've been very diligent about the way through. And as you can see in these special revenue funds right now, there's not any capital outlay that is new for FY21. However, some of that's in FY20 will carry over. Okay, special revenue expense by department. Community services is always going to be the leader in this, because there's a lot of different places that make up community services. So they take the cake. Transportation, which is streets, weeds, and drainage, they're up there. The senior center, of course, is up there. And so then some of our GRT funds, because it does include the transfers out, they're up there because they do transfer out and fund several different programs. But as you can see, special revenue is also made up of a lot of our small funds, which do good work. They just do it on a smaller scale than some of the bigger ones. Special revenue, revenues versus expenditures. This also shows, includes the transfers out, and the revenues include the transfers in. So as you can see, like on our 1984 GRT, that one's in really good shape. Our 1994 GRT is in really good shape. We still have some work to do on transportation to try and get it leveled out, but we're a lot farther along on that than we were 2 years ago. So excited about that. Everything else we've been able to keep pretty level. We've really been really diligent, especially with the lodgers tax funds, to try and keep them as level as possible. Especially in Fund 20, we really would like at some point to be able to start building their cash balance back up. You know, they spent that for a couple of years. They spent the cash balance down, and we haven't been able to get any traction with that. We were hoping to in FY21. Unfortunately, it looks like with the COVID-19 that's going to be a challenge. So, you know, we're trying to keep that one level, and hopefully we'll be able to start building their cash balance back up. Does anybody have any questions on special revenues? Okay. All right, capital. Capital includes all of our capital funds, including Fund 24, which is our grant capital fund. That also includes a lot of our grants, including our CIT grant for DPS. It also includes the money that we receive from the state for CIP, our DWI grant. All of the good work that Debbie does is in 24. Several of these are coming close to fruition, such as 54, our reverse osmosis project. The core is still going strong. And then we have some of our bond funds. We're in the process of doing the final research for these, especially Fund 121 and 122, to see what we can use those additional funds for and get to the process of getting that closed out and dealt with. So as you can see, this is the recap for our capital funds. Our capital funds are in pretty good shape. Fund 9, which is the straight capital fund, a lot of that budgeted expenditure will carry over, but we also have some new capital budgeted expenditures for that fund as well. And then as you can see, our top one there, the grant capital improvement, that has a lot of our grants in it, just our various different small ones. And then for FY21, you can see there's not a lot of expenditures in here, but the reason for that is the majority of the expenditures will carry over from FY20 for the projects that haven't been completed. So anything that's in here, budgeted new expenditures. 24, the allocations from the state that had been awarded prior to the virus outbreak are still included in there. We're cautiously optimistic that since those were not funded out of the state general fund and they were funded with bonds, that the state is going to have a hard time clawing that money back. They've got a lot of money they got to claw back. So we're, like I said, cautiously optimistic, but they're only there as a budget and they can't be used until the state agreements are signed. So we don't really have any liability with those. And then also to highlight Fund 105, our Economic Development Fund, that any economic development projects that haven't been completed will carry over. Money that's budgeted in there right now is for the OCDEC contract. Okay, revenue by category. The capital ones are driven by two things. They're driven by taxes or they're driven by grants. Really not anything else at this time that's driving the revenues in those funds. Transfers in and out. As you can see, that really varies depending on what is going on, what different projects. Some of these funds fund projects in other funds. Some of these funds have to be funded themselves, like the core project. So as you can see, we don't have any transfers in proposed for FY21. That's because everything that's currently budgeted as transfer in is to a project and will carry over if that project is still going at the end of FY20. And then expenditures by category, this is pretty self-explanatory. In the capital funds, capital is a big thing. We do have some other services budgeted in there. And then as you notice this time, we have a little bitty thing for salaries and benefits. That comes from the CIT grant that the police department has in Fund 24. So that's where the salaries and benefits come, are for the positions. Expense by department, as you can see, the big one is 109. 109 has a substantial amount budgeted in several different projects, and we know that there's even some projects that are going to carry over for 109. Capital improvement is up there as well, because it does encompass a great deal of our grant activity for the city, and then just some small amounts in some of the other funds. Questions on anything to do with the capital funds? Okay. And this is the capital fund revenues versus expenditures. All of the capital funds are well funded, so we're not concerned about those. Okay, so next.
I have a question. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah.
Probably hard to see me. Hold on. Part of the problem is you're cutting in and out. I don't know if anybody else is having that problem. So you may have answered this, and I apologize if you did, but I can hear about half of what you're saying. So, did you say something about was it the CIT grant for the police department?
Yes, the CIT grant for the police department is in Fund 24.
Okay, and is that the grant? That's the grant where they created the position, right? Didn't they create a position for that?
Correct. It's the grant from the Paso del Norte Health Foundation.
Yes.
So yes, it does fund. I don't remember her technical position, but she's a clinical therapist.
So there is somebody filling that position now.
Yes.
And okay. And do we know what? Because it wasn't a year by year thing.
It is a year by year thing. We did not hire her exactly on July 1st of year 2020. So there will be some of her budget for her salaries and benefits carry over to FY21. And I know Debbie and Chief Denton have also been in conversation with Paso del Norte about possibly next level funding.
Okay. And then the other one I had was the Fund 105.
Yes.
The 93,000 that you have budgeted. Did you say that's, so we don't have anything else, I guess is what I'm asking. We just have the contract with Octec, right? We don't have any other, everything else, all the other projects have been done. And
we do have other projects, but they are budgeted in FY20 and they will carry over to FY21.
21, but we have nothing coming up. I was just trying to remember. We have nothing coming up in FY21, nothing new.
Correct, because yeah, I can't budget anything in FY21 unless it's been approved by you guys.
Sure.
In FY21. So yeah, we don't currently have any future LEDA projects.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember. That's what I was thinking, but I couldn't remember. Okay, all right, very good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so for debt service, we have our 3 debt service funds, starting with Fund 53, which is our general obligation principal and interest. So this is paid for by our property tax. We're currently paying 5 bonds out of that. Then we have our Fund 59, which is our gross receipts tax principal and interest, which is paying currently 6 loans. And then we have our Fund 82, which is our water principal and interest. And this is currently paying 8 loans. So all of our debt service, again, is all controlled by the loan and bond schedules that we agree to when we agree to the financing. The biggest change that you'll notice here from FY20 to FY21 is in the estimated revenues. In Fund 82, we did a refunding this year, so we did have some loan proceeds, and those are in the revenues of Fund 82. So that makes our budgeted revenues and our budgeted expenditures look rather high for FY20 into FY21. As you can see, there's really the revenue here is property taxes to pay principal and interest in the one fund. We did have a large loan proceeds this year, but that's a one-off kind of deal. Without getting a new loan, obviously. And then the transfers in are very important because the transfers in are what we use to pay the debt service. So we have the transfers from the various funds. And then of course, the only expenditures is going to be our principals and interest. We have a couple small fees that we pay on some of our bonds and on our loans, but for the most part, it's all principal and interest. And as you can see kind of where we're at in terms of our debt service, our largest debt service is in our gross receipts tax, principal and interest, then our water and sewer, and then our general obligations. Okay. Moving into enterprise funds. These are our funds that rely not on gross receipts tax, but they rely heavily on user fees and charge for services. So in our recaps, you'll notice we do have two of those funds that are subsidized. The golf course receives a subsidy from the general fund, and the airport also receives a subsidy from the general fund. And so as you can see, these funds are going to take a hit because of the virus. However, the bigger difference in between the estimated revenues from year to year has to do with the Bonita Lake project in 81, because it's a very large revenue number that is going to carry over when we get to the end of the year. And so that's the same thing in both the revenues and expenditures. It's just a big project that's continuing to move forward. So as you can see, the water sewer fund is in good shape. That's another one that we are going to have to revisit probably at the beginning of next fiscal year, especially when we see the impact of not charging delinquency or late fees for however long we're going to have to keep that extended. So that's something that we're going to have to see the ramifications of and possibly accordingly in 81. The other one that is obviously doing really well is the landfill. The landfill is a star. So they've been moving along really well. Okay, enterprise revenues by category. Obviously, since these are enterprise funds, they're going to be driven by user fees. The user fees in 19 were in pretty good shape. As you can see, we substantially adjusted those down for FY20. And then they're kind of flat for FY21. That's a possibility of needing to move them. The grants, that's for the Bonita Lake project. So that's where some of that grant revenue is going to roll over. And then transfers in, the large transfer in for FY20 is the additional funds that we needed to do the match for the Bonita Lake project. So that transfer in is going to carry over. The transfer outs for the most part are to either debt service or for internal services the enterprise funds pay for. Expenditures, obviously capital is going to loom large. There's a gigantic project in one of the funds. Salaries and benefits, again, are a big part of this. Some of the increase for FY20 versus FY19 in the salaries and benefits was we adjusted the staffing all sorts of different ways for streets and water and we think we finally got that where we're happy with it. So that should all be projected the same way for FY20 and FY21. Other than that, everything has pretty much stayed flat. And of course, water and sewer is going to be the largest expenditure by category for enterprise funds, and will continue to be until the Bonita Lake project isn't in there anymore. Solid waste, golf course, landfill are all kind of right around there. And then the Housing Authority, this is where their 3 funds live as well. Enterprise revenues versus expenditures. This also includes the transfers in and out, because in most cases, these funds do have more revenue than they do expenditures, but some of them have transfers out for debt service or for other that they have to pay. So for the most part, they're in balance with a slight edge on some of the expenditures. Any questions on the enterprise funds? Trust and agency, these funds are pretty straightforward. These are just the funds that we hold in trust for other agencies or for ourselves. The only revenues and expenditures in this one are going to be for the state judicial and for the fees that we collect on behalf of the state, and then we turn around and we pay them back to the state. And so that's why our estimated revenues match our estimated expenses, because we're always trying to keep that the same and get that paid back to the state. Okay. So the next portion we're going to talk about is gross receipts tax, unless there's any questions on any of the funds, revenue and expenditures, or anything like that. Okay. So gross receipts tax. Our gross receipts tax budget for FY20 was based on a 3-year average with no planned growth. This was a conservative estimate intended to limit our chances of over budgeting our GRT revenue. There are 2 occurrences that happened in FY20 that were not included in the budget. One was the addition of the web-based tax from the legislature. And the second was we had a large GRT correction. One of the large retailers had not reported their GRT correctly. TRD eventually caught on to it and came back and made the correction for us. And that came to over $2 million in a correction. So that makes our number look super, super fabulous, but obviously that's a one-time situation that we're not gonna have a lot of. Also, due to changes in the state law, the hold harmless GRT that we had originally passed in early 2019 became no longer eligible, so it was not implemented. So that was something that we had talked about in the last budget process that we were not able to implement. So on that note, our FY20 original GRT budget is what's in that first column there that says FY20 budgeted. Our FY20 actual, so those are the actual amounts that we received in each of those months. As you can see, other than July, we were above our projections on every month. December and November look really, really good because those are the 2 months where we received our correction payments. That's why those 2 months are so substantially higher than what we had projected. But as you can see, through April, we were 3.7 million above our original projection.
Hey, Evelyn, I got a question on that.
Sure.
That correction at the state, do we get to charge them penalties and interest for late payments to us?
No.
We all know. Well, we all know they're collecting penalties and interest on that retailer that paid it late or had the mess up. So I'm just wondering, I know we're in that lawsuit, I think, because we know they don't report correctly. I just was wondering if it's something we could, I mean, penalties and interest on $2 million is a lot of money.
Yeah, they wouldn't even tell us who it was. So
They can't disclose that, I don't think, but
Yeah.
when it was supposed to have been collected, and then you know, say a year ago, penalties and interest from a year ago on $2 million is a lot of money.
Commissioner, this is Stephanie off camera, but I can ask the question, the correction that happened, the two
Uh-huh.
3-year period. So I can ask the question from TRD.
It was over a what period?
A 3-year period. So that 2-point-something million that we got.
Even better, it goes back 3 years, so the penalties and interest will be higher. So,
I can absolutely ask the question.
okay, I just was wondering, they wouldn't hesitate to charge that retailer, so
I ask a lot of questions. They're tired of me, but
they need to be asked, I mean, for years.
Good luck
we've
with
been, years we've been questioning whether we're getting the right disbursements and stuff, so. But thank you.
Okay, so then COVID-19 happened. So we luckily, when it did happen, we were still in the process of adjusting our budget. So we were able to go back for the FY20 budget and reproject for both May and June a decrease of 25%. And going forward for FY21, we again used our 3-year average and projected a 25% decrease through December of 2020 and a 12.5% decrease through March of 2021. In these projections, the new 1/8 percentage GRT increment that was passed in March is included in the FY 2021 projections. I know FY 20 on the PowerPoint, but it should be FY 2021. So based on that information, this chart here has our FY 20 revised budget. So the numbers in that first column are the actual numbers through April. And then the FY 20 budget and numbers decreased amounts with the 25% or the 12.5% cut. So as you can see, we believe from year to year that for FY 21, we're going to see a decrease of $0.9 million in our GRT if everything continues to happen. Again, the good news was we were still in the budget process when this happened. So because of that, we were able to adjust our expenses. We were able to talk to different departments, come up with different strategies. So the budget that we're presenting to you for FY21 is balanced with these decreases. The concern is going to be if we get to May and June and further, and the decreases are more than what we projected. But Brian has already been in talks with the departments and their directors about highlighting areas where we make cuts and we can make reductions to be able to deal with the situation if the decrease is more than what we projected. Okay, are there any questions on the GRT or any of that projections or where we think we're going with that? Okay, if not, I am going to turn it over to Katie so she can present her budget slides. And Katie, just tell me when you want to go to the next slide and we'll move it over.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. Good evening. I'm Katie Joslin, the HR director. I also have Kim Torres here with me. She's the senior HR generalist. I'm retiring June the 1st. So Kim is going to be the city's acting HR director in the interim. So we have her here tonight to sit with us through this budget information. Okay, this first screen is just some statistical information that we typically provide to the commission each year. These numbers were put together prior to the elimination of most of the regular part-time and the seasonal positions. Total actual positions, where it indicates there are 422 actual positions in fiscal year 21. That will be changed to 379. Current average tenure of staff is 8 years of service, and our voluntary turnover rate for calendar year 2019 was 19.6%. That went down from last year, which was 22.8%. The national average in our field is about 18%. Are there any questions? Okay, Evelyn, will you go to the next slide, please? Okay, this slide includes some information that of changes that are occurring either in fiscal year 21 or in the near future. There is information for fiscal year 21 from the minimum wage increase proposal that was presented to Commission last year during the fiscal year 21 budget. We're still proposing to do a 50-cent across the board increase and another 50-cent per hour increase on January 1 of 2021. Fiscal impact for that is estimated at $815,000. These numbers on this sheet were not adjusted by the 43 positions that we eliminated recently. Also, these numbers, the impact estimates, assume that all positions are filled the entire year. So realistically, those numbers are high. Our insurance plan is increasing the health, dental, and vision insurance premiums this year by 3%. Our workers' comp modification rate increasing this year from 1.38 to 1.53. We're attributing that to just 2 very large claims that we had this last year. We have a look back period of 4 years, which still includes some large claims we had a few years ago. Our incident rate has gone down about 25%. So what it means is we're experiencing much fewer claims. We've just got some high dollar claims. So we're just going to keep working at trying to improve that. The negotiations are currently open with the AFSCME and APSOA unions. Both of their contracts expire June the 30th of 2020 after a 4-year contract. So we're currently in negotiations with both of those unions. During the legislature this spring, House Bill 364 was passed. This bill makes numerous changes to the Public Employees Bargaining Act, primarily to the positions that are eligible for participation in the union. So we're anticipating that the number of positions that we have on board that will be eligible for the union will be increased. There are a number of other changes. Patria and I are presenting, well, I'm presenting, but she put it together. We're presenting an ordinance change next week to the commission, where there are so many changes to this act that the city's grandfathered bargaining ordinance will have to just be completely eliminated. So I'll talk with you more about that next week when we're presenting that questions. Legislature also passed Senate Bill 72 related to para factors with PERA. The changes that are affecting budget are not going to come into play until fiscal year 23. What they're doing is starting in fiscal year 23, they're raising the contribution rates for both the employee and the employer for 4 consecutive years. They're going to increase each side by 0.5%. There are a lot of different factors. They also included some provisions that if the fund is more healthy, that they can look at reducing the contribution rates. The only thing that's changing this year, July 1, 2020, is the cost of living increases to retirees. They are reverting back to a 2-year waiting period instead of 7. And they're also changing the vesting period back to 5 years from it had been changed to 8 years. There's also a threshold change for employees. There's a lower rate that they have to contribute if their salary is below $25,000. So we'll probably have some employees that'll help a little bit. Are there any questions? Okay, this screen is just giving you a little bit of information on how the 3% insurance premium increase will affect our employees. To demonstrate that, so for instance, the employee plus spouse premium is going to, and that's actually 3%. I fixed that, the numbers, but not on the title on the column. Sorry about that. For employee plus spouse, the 3% increase, $262.34. So the monthly impact to the employee is $15 a month. Annual impact is $183. The grid down at the bottom is for employees that their annual salary is $28,000 or less. For that category, the employee pays 25% of the employee-only premium and 47% of dependent premiums. The purpose of this category is to maintain compliance with the Affordable Care Act. Employee-only premiums they cannot exceed 9.5% of the employee's household income. So that's the way we're handling this. Any questions? This is the minimum wage proposal that we presented to the commission last year. No changes to it other than the estimate of the cost. And again, those estimates would come into play if every single position in the city was filled. So that those numbers, what we're looking to do in fiscal year 21 is to give employees a 50 cents July 1 and then 50 cents January 1 of 21. The new minimum wage rate in January of 2021 is $10.50 per hour. And I think that's it.
Okay, if there's no questions for Katie, then we will move on to our discussion about the reserve policy. Okay. So our current reserve policy was passed under resolution 2014-29. 1/12 of an operating reserve, which is the expenditure budget less capital that's required by DFA, to keep an additional 1/12 operating reserve for the general fund, to keep 2/12 of an operating reserve in the general fund for all the funds subsidized by the general fund, 2/12 of an operating reserve in any enterprise fund unless it is subsidized by the general fund, and all GRT income funds shall reserve 50% of the annual debt service. So per DFA, we are required to maintain a 1/12 operating reserve. So when we upload items to DFA for the budget, this is the only reserve that DFA calculates. They actually, at this time, don't have an area where we can even report that we have additional reserves in the electronic system. So have talked about the reserves in the past. In this budget process, we found it cumbersome to be able to balance the budget with the current reserve policy. So we're requesting to make the following changes to our reserve policy. We would retain 1/12 of an operating reserve as required by DFA. We would retain 1/12 of an operating reserve in the general fund for all the funds that are subsidized by the general fund. The enterprise funds that are not subsidized by the general fund would continue to keep a 1/12 reserve. That does not apply to the landfill. The landfill has a completely different reserve type that's approved by the landfill's board. That's something that's different for the landfill. And then all GRT income funds would reserve 50% of their annual debt service. So what we're asking to remove is the additional 1/12 reserve in the general fund for the general fund operating expenditures, and the additional 1/12 of the subsidy reserve that currently required under our reserve policy. So we are just requesting this because it will make it for us to be able to balance our budgets, use our funds better, but yet still keep us on the conservative side of a reserve policy. This is something that is on the commission agenda for the May 12th meeting. You will see it on there. And if this is something that you support, then we'll be able to pass it in the May 12th agenda and be able to include it in our preliminary budget that we send to DFA.
And I'm sorry, I'm assuming you'll have numbers to go with this, right?
So the numbers that are included on the recaps that you were presented for FY20, those are under our current reserve policy, and FY21 would be under the requested reserve policy. If we do not change the reserve policy and we want to leave it how it is, we will have to go back and we will have to find $1 million in general fund right off the top to get it down to zero.
Okay.
Yeah, you built it in.
Okay, I'll go back and look at it. I'm sorry, I'm only hearing about half of what you say, so I apologize.
Are there any questions on the reserve policy or questions on what we would like to do with it?
Evelyn, you've pretty much already done it on the presumption we'll do it, right?
So the software doesn't do it. The DFA software does it for the 112.
But I mean, as far as for the budget, as far as for budget purposes, we're balance the budget. We have to have that in there, or you're back to the trying to scratch out another $1 million. Is that correct? Somewhere.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. If we leave the reserve policy the way it's currently written, we would have to go back and find $1 million to be able to balance it.
Evelyn, one of the most important things to remember in this process too is there's state required reserve policies, and then there's also self-imposed reserve policies. And this is specifically what we're talking about, the self-imposed reserve policies. But I understand the reason to do this, but when it comes time for the meeting, I'd just like to discuss, we're just talking about doing it for the next year's fiscal budget. And if things go well, possibly reinstituting them afterwards, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. We could also, that's something that our current policy really doesn't address. And so that's something that we would add in our new policy, allowing a discussion for it on a more regular basis rather than just an ironclad, this is what we do, period.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions on the reserve policy, we will move to the outside agency slide. So this is currently the outside agencies that are budgeted at current contract levels in the budget. So we have Zia Therapy Center, which is for the Z-Trans. And these are the FY 2021 numbers. Some of these numbers, like Zia Therapy right now, since they're not running, they're not. But these are the numbers, assuming that their operations would be going on as of July 1st, 2021. They would be 147,382 out of Fund 44. The Alamogordo Chamber of Commerce, they've got their promotional part, which is 26,000 out of Fund 16, and their operational part, which is 25,000 out of Fund 11. We have Main Street Alamogordo, which is $40,000 out of Fund 11. We have the Otero County Economic Development Council, OCDEC, Fund 105 at 10% of the Economic Development GRT, which is estimated at 84,488. And then we also, different, but it is an outside agency. We have the 4th of July fireworks out of Fund 11 for $30,000. Normally, we're out of Fund 20. However, in an effort to get Fund 20 balanced, we went ahead and moved these into Fund 11. So, and then if there are any questions on outside agencies or on anything that we've discussed at all, that is the end of my PowerPoint. So.
Hey, Evelyn, I got a quick question. On the OCTEC deal, you guys got 10% of the deal budgeted or estimated at 84,000. Over on the page, when we first looked at it, it was showing 93, I believe. What's the difference? Why?
So there is another expense in that fund. It's the GRT admin fee we have to show as an expense. So in Fund 105 right now, the two expenses that make up that 83 or that 93 is the 84,000 and then plus the additional GRT admin fee expense.
That's the fee the state charges us to collect and remit our gross receipts tax?
Correct.
And then they up that like in the last session, like up to 4% or 5%?
Actually, they decreased it.
Did they decrease it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was gonna say, I don't know how the rest of y'all feel, but you know, the business owners do all that work for them. It's all on the computer nowadays. I really don't see why we pay them a fee to collect that money for us. Another question for Stephanie to ask them.
I can totally ask them.
Thank you.
And the 80, I'm sorry, sorry. The 84,000-ish that for OCTEC, 10% of economic development GRT, is that what we're estimating for this coming year, or do you just do it like do we anticipate that being any different this coming fiscal year?
So that is the FY21 projection.
That is the projection.
That's
okay.
10%.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I think what a great job and a lot of work I know went into this. I know you worked on this thing for many months really to get us where we're at. And I think the presentation was awesome. It saddens me to see how well we were doing. And then now what we're having to look at and deal with. I mean, it's not just Alamogordo. I mean, this is going on nationwide, but it's so sad because we were moving forward in such a strong way. We'll catch back up, but it's a tough one. But great job, guys. Great job.
You know, and that's true. I agree with you, but I have to tell you, you were very perky when you presented it. And so it wasn't so bad listening to it. I have to say, I was expecting it to be a lot worse. And I was like, you know, she was kind of upbeat about the whole thing. So thank you for putting that positive spin on it. I think we all needed that because
Did you keep
I was
track of-
expecting gloom and doom, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be awful. I'm not even looking forward to this. But you handled it very well, Evelyn. Thank you.
Thank
Do you
you.
have any record of the number of hours that was spent on this by staff between? I mean, it would be a big number, I'm sure.
I was telling everybody, we complete the budget and we get the budget books and everything, and it's fine. It just seemed like this year, up until the day I put your guys' budget books together, I was printing new reports because Brian would come in like every morning and he'd be like, they're going to cut lodger's tax again, or, you know, they're going to do this again. And so we revised it more this year in between our directors meetings and in between publishing the books more than we ever have before. So, and unfortunately it's probably going to need another revision before it goes in July too. So.
Great job.
Great
Thank
job, Evelyn.
Yeah, thank you.
Really, thank you, Evelyn. Good job. And good job, Katie, as well.
And
Oh, thank you.
there were other people. Stephanie and Brian did a lot on this, I know too.
Please don't forget us.
Don't forget Brian.
I didn't see you, so we thought it didn't count for some reason. I don't know.
Oh,
This whole virtual thing, we've got to get used to
was Brian even here?
it.
He
Yeah.
came for the beginning and he came at the end. So
And in between, I was running back and forth to get you back online.
Thank you. So
And
I
this
just
is-
wanted to say one thing real quick. I think the hardest thing with the budget, moving forward is it's right at the beginning, it's the assumptions of the budget. And, after talking to Brian and doing a little studying myself, I think the assumptions you have in here are probably pretty spot on. So I feel comfortable with how you guys move forward with that. I'll echo what Commissioner Payne said. I was kind of not looking forward to getting reelected. I was pretty happy about it. And then this happened. I thought, oh God, I don't want to go through this budget process, but no, very, very well done. Thank you very much. Sorry, I got kicked off there for a while. I promised I wouldn't ask any more questions.
Well, and everybody, this is Katie's last budget. So, and she's a big part of getting all of our salaries and benefits right. So we're going to miss that.
Don't get too excited about that or anything.
Right.
Thank you, Katie. And Kim, I know you had a big involvement in this also. And we
Thank
appreciate
you.
you guys. We really do.
And it's going to get bigger.
Right, yeah.
Anything else?
We need to make a motion.
I would listen for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Baldwin to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from everybody else. No, Commissioner, Commissioner Bearden. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. It was good to see you all.
Yes, you too.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See everybody.